August 16, 216 BC. The dust hasn't settled, the blood hasn't dried, and Consul Lucius Aemilius Paulus is watching something worse than death. 50,000 Roman soldiers, the best trained killing machine the ancient world has ever seen. And right now, they're turning into a mob, not defeated, not retreating, dissolving. This is Cannae, and you think you know this story. You think it's about Hannibal's genius, his double envelopment, his cavalry. Wrong. This is about what Roman commanders feared more than any Carthaginian blade, more than elephants, more than being outnumbered. They feared this moment, when the machine stops being a machine, when order dies. Here's what nobody tells you about Roman warfare. The Romans didn't win because they were braver. They didn't conquer the Mediterranean because their swords were sharper. They won because they did something impossible, something that defied every natural human instinct under the scream and chaos of battle. They stayed together. While their enemies fought as warriors, Rome fought as a system. Ranks, rotations, signals, standards, drill, drill, drill. A legion wasn't 7,200 individual fighters. It was one organism with 7,200 limbs, all moving to the same rhythm, the same breath, the same iron heartbeat. That was Rome's superpower. Controlled collective action, not courage. Control. But here's the thing about machines. They break. And when a Roman legion broke, when that control cracked even for a heartbeat, Rome lost the only thing that made it Rome. Watch what's happening at Cannae right now. The Roman center is pushing forward. They're winning. Can you feel it? The front ranks are carving through Hannibal's Gauls and Spaniards. The enemy is giving ground, step by step. The Romans are doing what they always do. Pressing, grinding, inevitable as a millstone. But look closer. The formation is bending, curving inward. The ranks are getting tighter, shoulder to shoulder, then chest to back, then crushed. 70,000 men being funneled into a space meant for 30,000. Do you see it yet? The Roman officers see it. They're screaming orders that nobody can hear over the roar of 80,000 men trying to kill each other. They're watching their own success become their execution. Because here's what the military writer Vegetius will write about this exact nightmare centuries later, after Rome has learned this lesson in blood 1,000 times. When troops get too crowded, they embarrass one another. When they spread out, gaps open. Either way, the enemy penetrates. And 10. Universal disorder and confusion. Those aren't dramatic words. That's the technical term for what kills empires. The Roman commanders at Cannae know what's coming next. They've drilled for this, trained for this, built their entire careers preparing for this exact moment. They know that Roman tactics only work if formation holds. Tight spacing, aligned ranks, coordinated movement. The moment those things fracture, the Roman sword becomes just another piece of metal. The Roman shield becomes just another piece of wood. And 70,000 Romans become just another crowd, waiting to die. But why? Why does formation matter so much? Why can't Romans just fight? They're brave, aren't they? They're strong. They're willing to die for Rome. Here's the secret. A Roman legionary in formation is unstoppable. He's got a shield protecting his left side and his buddy's shield protecting his right. The man behind him can step up when he tires. The man beside him anchors his position. He rotates out, catches his breath, steps back in. He's not fighting alone. He's not surviving alone. He's a piece of something bigger. But take away that formation. That legionary is just a man, tired, scared, alone in a sea of screaming faces and stabbing iron. He doesn't know if his buddy is still beside him. He doesn't know if the line still exists behind him. He doesn't know if he should push forward or fall back, or stand still, or run. And that uncertainty, that moment of not knowing, that's where chaos lives. That's what Roman commanders feared more than anything Hannibal could ever do to them. Back to Cannae, the center is collapsing inward, not breaking yet, not routing, but compressing. The rear ranks are pushing forward, eager for glory, not knowing the front ranks have nowhere to go. Romans are stepping on Romans. Shields are jamming into backs. Swords have no room to swing, and Hannibal's cavalry has just smashed through the Roman horsemen. They're swinging around behind. The trap is closing. But the real trap, the one that's about to kill 50,000 men, it's not Hannibal's genius, it's the loss of control. Watch what happens when that first soldier in the compressed Roman center tries to turn around, when he realizes the enemy isn't just in front anymore, when he hears hoofbeats behind him and sees nowhere to go and feels the panic rising in his chest like cold water. He breaks, and panic spreads faster than information. One man becomes 10, 10 becomes 100. The ranks are cracking, not everywhere. That's the horror of it. Some sections are still fighting, still holding, still believing the formation exists. But beside them, behind them, men are running into each other, tripping, falling, getting trampled by their own brothers. The standards, those sacred eagles that are supposed to anchor every man's position, are swaying, tilting. Some are already down in the dust. The horns are blowing retreat signals, but half the army can't hear them over the screaming, and the other half doesn't know if the signals are real or if it's the enemy's trick. This is every Roman commander's nightmare made flesh. Not the enemy winning, the system failing. Because here's what you need to understand. A Roman general doesn't command soldiers, he commands a machine. And that machine only works when every piece knows its place, its function, its connection to every other piece. Cut those connections. The machine becomes a crowd. And crowds don't fight, they die. Let's rewind. Before Cannae. Before the nightmare. What made a Roman legion impossible to break? Picture this. It's a dusty field outside Rome. Dawn. 3,000 recruits stand in rough clusters, yawning, scratching, wondering why they volunteered for this. They're farmers, shopkeepers, sons of merchants. They've never killed anyone. Most have never even been in a fight. 6 months from now, they'll be a legion. How? Not through speeches, not through inspiration, through repetition so brutal it rewrites their bones. The centurion, imagine him, scarred face, voice like gravel scraping iron, doesn't teach them to be brave. He teaches them to move together. Step, shield up, thrust, step back, let your brother step forward. Again, 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 10,000 times, 20,000 times, until they don't think about it anymore, until the formation becomes their body and breaking formation feels like cutting off their own arm. This is what made Rome Rome, not the glory, the drill. Vegetius centuries after Cannae will write it down like holy scripture. Victory in battle depends on signals and order. Signals and order. Those two words, that's the whole empire right there. Because a Roman commander on a battlefield can't talk to his men, can't inspire them, can't even see most of them through the dust and blood and chaos. So how does he command 7,200 souls spread across half a mile of screaming violence? Systems, audio signals, horns, trumpets. Each one means something specific. Advance, halt, wheel left, refused flank. The legionaries don't need to understand Latin or strategy or the big picture. They just need to recognize the sound and know bone deep, beyond thought what that sound means their body should do. Visual signals, eagles, standards, banners. Watch them, always watch them. If the eagle moves forward, you move forward. If the eagle holds, you hold. The standard isn't decoration. It's not symbolism. It's the anchor that keeps 30 men from drifting away when the melee turns into a nightmare of dust where you can't see 3 feet ahead. And here's the beautiful, terrible genius of it. The system works because human voices fail in chaos. Vegetius is blunt about this. An army in battle's confusion cannot be governed by a single voice. Impossible. The roar swallows everything. So Rome built something better than a voice. They built a language of sound and sight that could cut through the chaos. If it held. If. But formations are fragile things. The Gallic tribes Rome fought. They'd charge like a thunderstorm. Brave, ferocious, terrifying. Huge warriors screaming their war cries, swinging swords that could split a man from shoulder to hip. And the Romans would stand there, packed tight, shields locked. And they'd let that fury break against their wall. Why couldn't the Gauls do that? Because the Gauls fought as warriors. And warriors need space. Room to swing. Room to prove their courage. Room to win personal glory. Romans fought as pieces, cogs, components. And a component doesn't need glory. It needs to fit perfectly with a component beside it. That's why Roman officers obsessed over rank discipline. Not opening too much. Not closing too much. Keep the spacing, always the spacing. Too close and you embarrass one another, weapons jam, shields tangle, men trip. Too far and gaps open. And gaps? Gaps are where enemies pour through like water through cracks in a dam. Let me show you what a Roman officer sees when he looks at his formation. He doesn't see men, he sees a structure, load-bearing walls of shields, corridors for rotation, channels for information flow from horn to standard to rank to man, every piece supporting every other piece. And he knows that if you rearrange that structure mid-battle, even for a good reason, you create turbulence. Confusion, men moving past each other, uncertain who's supposed to be where. And the enemy sees that moment of uncertainty like sharks see blood in water. They exploit it, they pull in. They turn your clever tactical adjustment into a rupture, into chaos. This is why Roman commanders didn't innovate on the battlefield. You see that in movies, right? The general has a brilliant idea mid-battle, changes the plan, adapts, improvises. Roman commanders did the opposite. They drilled one plan, one formation, one system, and then they trusted it, because changing formations under pressure was how you died. That's not cowardice. That's understanding that their advantage wasn't flexibility. It was cohesion. The enemy could be more flexible, more creative, more individually skilled. But could they stay together when the world turned into blood and screaming? Rome could, if the formation held. Now imagine you're that Roman commander. You've spent 6 months turning farmers into legionaries. You've drilled them until they dream in formation. You've built this beautiful, impossible machine that can conquer anything the world throws at it, and you're about to take it into battle. What's your worst fear? Not the enemy being strong. You can handle strong. Not being outnumbered. You've won outnumbered before. Your worst fear is your own machine breaking. One gap opening at the wrong moment, one standard falling, one horn signal getting lost in the roar, one centurion going down and his century losing its anchor, one cluster of recruits who didn't drill enough, didn't internalize the rhythm, who panic when the pressure comes. And then panic spreads. Because here's the thing about human fear in battle, it's contagious. You can be brave, you can be ready to die for Rome, but if the man next to you breaks, if you see him running, eyes wide with terror, and you're standing there alone wondering if maybe he knows something you don't, that doubt is poison. It spreads through formations like fire through dry grass. Not everywhere at once. That's what makes it so insidious. One section breaks. The section beside them is still fighting. They don't know what's happening. They just know something feels wrong. The rhythm is off. The system is glitching. And doubt becomes fear, becomes panic, becomes root. The Roman commanders knew this. They'd seen it happen. They'd studied it. They'd read the old accounts of battles won and lost. They knew that more armies defeated themselves through disorder than were ever actually beaten by the enemy's strength. So they built everything around, preventing that moment. The camp, the drill, the signals, the centurions, the sacred eagles, the brutal punishments for breaking formation, the rewards for holding. The entire Roman military machine was one massive, elaborate system designed to answer one question. How do you keep men acting as one body when every human instinct screams at them to save themselves? And the answer: you make the system stronger than instinct. You make the formation feel safer than flight. You make breaking ranks feel like suicide and holding ranks feel like survival. You make order more powerful than chaos. But power isn't the same as invincible. And at Cannae, Hannibal is about to prove that even the Roman machine has a breaking point. The camp. Let me show you where the war against chaos really begins. It's not on the battlefield. It's every single night when a Roman army stops marching. What do? Do they collapse exhausted? Find the nearest shelter? Scatter to find food and water? No. They build a city. Every single night. Doesn't matter if they're only staying one night. Doesn't matter if they're exhausted. Doesn't matter if the enemy is miles away. The moment a Roman army stops moving, they start digging. Trenches, ramparts, gates, streets. And inside those walls, perfect geometry. Polybius, the Greek historian who watched this madness firsthand, describes it like he's witnessing something supernatural. The Roman marching camp has fixed streets, fixed positions. Every cohort knows exactly where it camps. Every century has its assigned space. The commander's tent goes here, the cavalry there, the supplies there. Why? Because chaos doesn't wait for battle. Picture this. It's 3 in the morning. The perimeter guard spots movement. Enemy cavalry probing the defenses. Or worse, a full assault, surprise attack. The kind that should turn any sleeping army into a panicked mob. But Roman soldiers wake up knowing exactly where they are in relation to everything else. The Via Principalis runs east-west. The Via Praetoria runs north-south. Your sentry is in the 3rd row, 2nd position from the main gate. You don't need light. You don't need orders. You know where your weapons are. You know where your sentry assembles. You know where the enemy has to come from if they breach the walls. Polybius saw the genius in it. The camp design prevents units from pouring into choke points in a mass and trampling each other. No bottlenecks, no confusion, no Romans crushing Romans in the dark while enemies pour through. This is anti-chaos architecture. Discipline made visible in ditches and dirt. And the guards, those poor souls standing watch while everyone else sleeps, they don't dare fail. Polybius notes that penalties for failures on guard duty are severe and inevitable. Not sometimes severe, not usually inevitable, always. Because one guard falling asleep isn't just one mistake, it's a crack in the system. And cracks spread, so the watches are most scrupulously kept, not through inspiration, through fear. But here's what's brilliant and terrifying about Roman discipline. It's not just about punishment. The centurions, those scarred, brutal, absolutely essential middle managers of the Roman war machine, they're not just enforcers. They're the human connections in a system that could otherwise feel like cold machinery. A centurion knows his 80 men, knows who's brave and who's faking it, knows who'll hold when things get bad and who needs to be watched, knows exactly how much pressure each man can take before something breaks inside him. And in battle, the centurion doesn't command from behind. He's in the front rank, right there, bleeding with them, dying with them. That's the bargain. The centurion demands absolute obedience, but he earns it by never asking his men to do something he won't do first. Now combine everything: the camp that trains order into muscle memory, the centurions who embody the system, the standards that give every man a visual anchor, the horn signals that cut through chaos, the endless drilling that makes formation feel like home and breaking formation feel like death, all of it working together, all of it supporting all of it. That's how Rome conquered the world. But systems are only as strong as their weakest moment, and every Roman commander knows that moment is coming. The moment when order meets chaos and only one survives. Let's talk about what happens when panic starts. Not full rout, not yet, just the beginning. One man in the 3rd rank sees something. Maybe it's real. Maybe it's not. Maybe he sees a gap opening. Maybe he thinks he hears the retreat horn. Maybe the guy next to him just took a spear through the throat and he's suddenly viscerally aware that he could be next. He takes one step back, just one. The man behind him feels the pressure change, feels the formation shifting, takes a step back to keep distance. Now it's 2 men, then 5, then a dozen. And here's the nightmare. The sentry beside them is still holding, still fighting, still committed. They don't know what's happening. They just feel their flank becoming uncertain, feel the solid wall they depend on becoming questionable. Doubt spreads faster than fire. The tribune sees it happening, sees that one section starting to unravel. He's screaming orders, but his voice is nothing against the roar of battle. He signals the horn. But which horn? Advance to pressure the breaking section forward. Retreat to reform. Hold position and hope it stabilizes. Choose wrong, and you accelerate the collapse. Choose right, and you might hold. But you're making that choice with incomplete information, no time, and the absolute certainty that men are dying every second you hesitate. This is what Roman commanders lived with. Not the fear of death. Death is clean. Death is simple. Death is one man's ending. This is the fear of watching your machine come apart, watching order dissolve into fragments, watching your perfectly drilled legion turn into clusters of terrified men who can't hear orders, can't see standards, can't tell if they're supposed to fight or run or die where they stand. Livy describes this exact horror at Cannae. One sector collapses into panic-stricken flight while other sections are still fighting. Can you imagine that? You're in the 2nd rank, still holding formation, still believing in the system, and you glance left and see Romans running. Running past you, eyes wide, weapons thrown down. What do? Do you hold, trust the training, trust that your section can survive, even if the section beside you broke? Or do you recognize that the machine is failing, and saving yourself is the only rational choice? That's the moment, that's the choice. And every Roman commander knows that once enough men choose flight, the choice stops being individual. The panic becomes a wave, a flood, a contagion that turns the entire army into what Livy describes as men rushing like blind men, tangling together, falling over each other, dying without the enemy even touching them, crushed by their own brothers, trampled by their own fear. That's not defeat by the enemy's strength, that's system failure. And here's the deepest fear. What if the chaos doesn't stop at battle? What if disorder spreads beyond the battlefield and into the camp itself, into the command structure, into the political body of Rome? Because it's happened before. AD 14, Emperor Augustus just died. Tiberius takes power, and in the distant provinces Pannonia, Germania, the legions that are supposed to be Rome's iron fist start to question. Tacitus describes it like watching a nightmare unfold in slow motion. The troops see the change of emperor as a chance for license in tumult and profit from civil conflict. Read that again. Profit from civil conflict. The legions stop being instruments of the state. They become political actors. They become mobs with weapons. They become crowds inside the camps giving speeches, making accusations, choosing sides, turning on their officers. The Pannonian Mutiny shows what happens when military discipline dissolves. No enemy present. No battle. Just Romans arguing with Romans, threatening Romans, killing Romans. The centurions, those essential nodes in the command structure, get dragged from their tents, beaten, murdered by their own men. Why? Because the system broke. The orders stopped making sense. The chain of command became questionable. And once soldiers stop seeing themselves as components in a machine and start seeing themselves as individuals with grievances and opinions and agency, the machine is gone, and what's left is chaos with swords. So how do you stop it? How do you keep thousands of men from becoming a mob? How do you prevent the machine from tearing itself apart? Rome had an answer. Actually, Rome had many answers. A whole spectrum of tools, rewards, shame, ritual, symbols, centurions, and yes, violence. But here's what history gets wrong. You've heard of decimation, right? 1 man in 10, chosen by lot, beaten to death by his own brothers. The ultimate Roman punishment for cowardice or mutiny. The word itself has become synonymous with Roman brutality, with iron discipline enforced through terror. It makes a good story. It's also mostly a myth, not completely. Decimation happened. But here's what modern scholarship reveals. It was rare, exceptionally rare. Not a routine tool, not standard operating procedure, not the core mechanic of the Republican army like some historians claimed. It was shock and awe, reserved for the most extreme breakdowns. Used so rarely that when it did happen, it became legendary. Writers like Livy and Tacitus mentioned it specifically because it was exceptional. The real Roman discipline was subtler and more effective. Think about it. If you're decimating legions regularly, you're not building loyalty. You're building resentment. Fear, yes, but fear that curdles into hatred, into the exact kind of disorder you're trying to prevent. The Romans were smarter than that. They understood something profound about human nature. You can't rule by terror alone. You need men to want to hold the line, to feel pride in the formation, to see their identity wrapped up in being part of something bigger than themselves. So Rome built a system of graduated pressure. First level, shame. A soldier who showed cowardice didn't just face punishment. He faced humiliation. His century knew. His cohort knew. The whole legion knew. In a culture where honor meant everything, where your dignitas was your identity, shame was a weapon more powerful than any whip. And the opposite, glory, rewards. The corona moralis for the first man over the enemy wall. De hasta pura for excepcional valor. Promotions, land grants, recognition. Rome dangled glory in front of its soldiers and made cowardice socially unbearable. Second level, the sacred oath, the sacramentum. Every recruit swore it. Not just a promise to obey, a sacred vow that bound their soul. Break it, And you're not just a criminal, you're forsworn, cursed. The gods themselves turn against you. Did every soldier believe it, literally? Maybe not. But the weight of it? The psychological pressure of having sworn before the gods and your brothers that you would hold the line. That pressure kept men standing when every instinct screamed run. Third level, structural control. The centurions again, they're everywhere. In the ranks, in the camp, watching, correcting, reinforcing, not just through punishment, but through presence. They're the human embodiment of the system, the voice that reminds you what you're part of. And the standards, those eagles and banners, they're not just visual signals, they're sacred objects. Losing your legion's eagle is the ultimate shame. Entire military campaigns were launched to recover lost eagles. Men died protecting them. Why? Because the eagle isn't just metal and cloth, it's the physical representation of the legion's honor, its identity, its soul. You don't abandon your soul to save your skin. Fourth level, routine punishment, flogging, extra duties, rations cut, demotion, the kind of everyday discipline that keeps minor infractions from becoming major breakdowns. The centurions' staff, the Vitus, became infamous because they used it regularly, not to terrorize but to correct. Think of it like maintaining a machine. You don't wait for catastrophic failure. You fix small problems before they cascade. A soldier shows up drunk to drill? Punishment. Immediate. Prédictable. Not brutal. Just inevitable. That's the key word. Inevitable. Not severity. Certainty. And then only then the extreme measures. Fustuarium. Being beaten to death by your fellow soldiers for serious offenses like desertion or sleeping on guard duty. It happened. It was brutal, and it sent a message. But it wasn't common. It couldn't be common. Use it too often, and it loses impact. Worse, it breeds resentment that undermines the cohesion you're trying to build. Decimation, even rarer. Later writers used it as a symbol, a rhetorical tool to show absolute command power, the ultimate example of discipline taken to its logical extreme. But in practice, most Roman commanders never ordered it, never needed to, because the real discipline was the system itself, the camp layout that made order feel natural, the drill that turned formation into instinct, the centurions who embodied the standards, the sacred oaths, the public honors, the inevitable minor punishments, the brotherhood of the century, the pride of the legion, all of it working together, all of it reinforcing the central message: you are safe in formation, you are powerful in formation, you are Roman in formation. Break formation and you're just meat. Vegetius understood this centuries later when he wrote his manual. He doesn't spend chapters describing decimation or brutal punishments. He spends them describing drill, practice, repetition, signals, the mechanics of keeping men together under pressure, because he understood what Roman commanders had always known. You can't beat order into men, you have to build it into them, brick by brick, drill by drill, day by day, until staying together isn't something they're forced to do. It's something they can't imagine not doing. But even the best-built system has limits. Even Rome, with all its drilling, all its centurions, all its sacred eagles and brutal punishments, and carefully designed camps, even Rome couldn't eliminate chaos completely. They could minimize it, control it, push it to the edges. But eliminate it? No, because chaos isn't just an external threat. It's not just the enemy's tactics or bad luck or terrain. Chaos is built into the human condition. It's the fear that lives in every soldier's chest when the arrows start falling. It's the doubt that creeps in when you can't see your centurion through the dust. It's the survival instinct that screams louder than any oath when you see your brothers falling. Rome's genius wasn't eliminating chaos. Rome's genius was building a machine strong enough to contain it, to give men something solid to hold onto when the world turned into blood and screaming, to make the system feel more real, more permanent, more trustworthy than their own fear. And it worked. For centuries, it worked. Rome built the most successful military machine the ancient world ever saw. Not because Roman soldiers were braver than Gauls or stronger than Germans or more skilled than Greeks. Because they stayed together when everyone else fell apart. But machines need maintenance. They need constant care, constant reinforcement, constant vigilance against the cracks that appear when pressure builds. And every Roman commander knew that the moment they stopped maintaining the system, the moment they got lazy about drill, or slack about camp discipline, or soft about punishments, that's when chaos would return. Not as an invading army, as rot from within, as the slow dissolution of order into disorder, of legion into mob, of Rome into just another fallen empire that forgot what made it great. The enemy could never do that to Rome. Only Rome could do that to itself. Back to Cannae. One last time, the sun is setting, the dust is settling, and 50,000 Romans are dead, not all killed by Carthaginian swords, not all struck down by enemy spears, many thousands crushed by their own brothers, trampled in the panic, suffocated in the press of bodies, drowned trying to cross the river in full armor because running into water seems safer than staying in the chaos. Hannibal won this battle, but chaos killed these men. The Roman machine broke. And when it broke, all those thousands of hours of drill, all that careful discipline, all those sacred oaths and honored eagles and centurions screaming orders, none of it mattered, because the formation failed. And without formation, Romans were just men, scared, alone, dying. But here's what you need to understand about Rome. This wasn't the end. Cannae should have broken Rome, should have ended the war, should have proven that Hannibal's genius could unmake Rome's order. It didn't. Rome lost 50,000 men at Cannae. And 10? Rome raised new legions, drilled them, rebuilt the machine, and kept fighting for 14 more years until they won. How? Because Roman commanders learned the lesson. They learned it in blood, but they learned it. The lesson wasn't Hannibal is unbeatable, or our tactics are wrong, or we need better generals. The lesson was never let chaos take the field. After Cannae, Roman commanders became even more obsessive about control, more careful about formation, more ruthless about maintaining discipline, more creative about denying the enemy the chance to create disorder. Fabius Maximus, the general who took command after Cannae, his entire strategy was about not fighting. Shadow Hannibal, harass his supplies, deny him the pitched battle where his genius could create chaos. The Romans called him the delayer, mocked him for cowardice. But he understood something profound. You can't lose to chaos if you never give chaos the opportunity to appear. And eventually, Rome produced Scipio Africanus, the general who finally beat Hannibal. Not by being more aggressive, not by having braver soldiers, but by being more disciplined, more controlled, more committed to the Roman system. At Zama, the final battle, Scipio did something impossible. He created gaps in his formation, deliberately, let Hannibal's war elephants charge through those gaps without breaking his lines. Kept his men standing perfectly still while tons of angry elephants stampeded past them. That's not tactics. That's discipline. That's drill so deep it overrides survival instinct. And then, when the elephants were gone and the infantry clash came, Scipio's legions held formation, rotated fresh troops forward, kept the machine working, while Hannibal's army, brilliant, experienced, victorious, started to fracture. The machine beat the genius. Order conquered chaos. Rome defeated Carthage not because Romans were better warriors, but because Roman commanders understood what mattered more than courage, more than tactics, more than individual skill. Cohesion. The ability to stay together when everything screams at you to fall apart. So what's the real story here? Roman commanders feared chaos more than the enemy because they understood something that took the ancient world centuries to learn. Battles aren't won by the strongest or bravest or most skilled. They're won by whoever can maintain order longest. The Gauls were stronger. The Germans were fiercer. The Greeks were more educated. The Carthaginians were richer. Hannibal was a genius. None of it mattered. Because when the chaos came, and the chaos always came, they broke and Rome held. The Roman system wasn't perfect. It required constant maintenance, brutal discipline, endless drill. Centurions who were part enforcer, part brother, part priest of the sacred machine. Soldiers who surrendered their individuality to become components. And even then, it failed sometimes. Cannae, Teutoburg Forest, Carrhae. Moments when the machine met circumstances it couldn't handle, and thousands died screaming in disorder. But more often, far more often, it worked. And every time it worked, Rome grew stronger, more confident, more convinced that their way, the way of order, discipline, and controlled collective action, was the superior way. Until eventually, Rome forgot. Centuries later, the late Empire, when the legions became less about drill and more about hiring barbarians, when discipline became negotiable, when political chaos in Rome spread to military chaos in the field, that's when Rome truly fell. Not to stronger enemies, not to better tactics, not to any external force. Rome fell when it stopped maintaining the system, when it let chaos creep back in, when the machine rusted from neglect and the commanders stopped fearing disorder enough to prevent it. The lesson stands eternal. You want to build something that lasts, that conquers, that defies the odds. You don't do it through individual brilliance, through inspiring speeches, through bold gambles or clever tricks. You do it through systems, through discipline that's boring and repetitive and unglamorous, through the thousand small decisions that maintain order when chaos presses from every side. You do it by fearing chaos more than you fear the enemy. Because here's the truth Roman commanders knew in their bones: the enemy can kill your soldiers, can defeat your army, can win the battle. But chaos can unmake everything you are, can turn your strengths into weaknesses, can make your own army the instrument of its own destruction. The enemy has to work to beat you. Chaos just has to wait for you to fail. And that's why Roman commanders lay awake at night, not strategizing about the enemy, not planning brilliant maneuvers, checking the watch rotations, reviewing the drill schedules, making sure the centurions knew their jobs, ensuring the standards were secure, verifying the horn signals were rehearsed, maintaining the camp discipline, watching for the 1,000 tiny cracks that could become catastrophic failures, because they knew the enemy was across the field. But chaos was always one broken formation away, one panicked sentry away, one failed signal away. The enemy could kill Romans, but chaos could unmake Rome, and in the end, that made all the difference.